I'm Shaun Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now. Welcome to RealAg on the Weekend. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com. It is great to be with you here today. And finally, we're getting some much warmer weather in good parts of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. And it's feeling like farming. There was a lot of people I think that got rolling this week, at least trying to attempt to put some seed in the ground. And spring is underway as we have hit May, and this is always the time of the year where farmers are. It's April. You're always like, it's early. Take our time. Once that calendar flips to May, it is really, really go time in a lot of the fields. So good idea to everybody, if you are sharing the roads with some farm machinery, to make sure that you give it some extra room, maybe a little bit slower speed, be safe on the roads. And for all the farmers and ranchers that are listening, make sure if you are transporting equipment on some of the highways and side roads that you are using as much precaution as you possibly can. Well, hey, today on RealAg on the Weekend, I'm looking forward to having Chuck Penner here from Leftfield Commodity Research. We're going to talk about some of the seasonality trends of some of the commodities that farmers are going to be putting in the ground here. As when we hit the growing season, we tend to put the markets in the rearview mirror. We can't do that. We got to think about our marketing and farm at the same time. We're also going to be hearing a product spotlight with Lemken today. Ivor Bernatsky will be with us. We've also got David Coletto from Abacus Data. We're going to break down some of the election results we saw this past Monday, where we saw a liberal minority government. And then we're going to finish up talking about how do you teach your kids about money or wealth? This week I did an interview for our Mind Your Farm business podcast at RealAgriculture.com. We haven't published the interview yet, but I'm going to give you a bit of a sneak peek. Now, if you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or, of course, you can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Remember to go to realagriculture.com/subscribe. And you can check out all of our great e-newsletters to keep yourself updated on the latest and greatest and get that insight on what is happening in the world of agriculture. Well, let's get to my conversation with Chuck Penner of Leftfield Commodity Research. I guess the equity market is extremely focused on impact of tariffs, threats of tariffs. How's the commodity market reacting to all of this right now?
Well, I think it's kind of maybe in a bit of a period of wishful thinking or hoping all of this just goes away. For the most part, our commodities that we're trading with the U.S. are still under the USMCA or the CUSMA or depending which country you're in, how the abbreviation goes. But those are still under that agreement. And so we've been able to avoid that for the most part for our ag commodities. And that can always change. My expectation though is that the worst of that turmoil is past, and now some more logical thinking is occurring, and so on. So I'm kind of hoping on that front we're seeing that kind of fade away. I think China is still a bit of a wild card. There are people who have suggested that, well, maybe China will scale back the tariffs on peas and on canola products and so on. I think that's more wishful thinking than anything. And then there's always the possibility that they slap some tariffs on canola seed yet too. So there is that kind of stuff. But I think the most part, markets are trading more on fundamentals, and now we're getting into the weather season for a lot of these crops and things like that. So there's just a lot more buzz about that. That doesn't mean this has disappeared entirely, but we're getting back to thinking about the things we usually think about.
Yeah, so if we are focused on fundamentals right now, are they becoming more of the focus? What are the fundamentals telling us about the broader market?
Well, we're really watching what's going on we start in the wheat market and we're watching what goes on in the winter wheat market. And then, of course, we're starting to see planting of the spring wheat crop and so on. There are areas of concern of dryness. I was looking at a map yesterday of Western Canada, and, that northern tier of the prairies, really hasn't had any rain in the last 30 days. and it's been drier already a little bit earlier in the year. So not that it's a imminent problem, but it's a concern. Northern U.S., Montana, especially eastern Montana, western North Dakota, those are drying out as well too. So those kind of things that are specific to crops that we grow here are starting to become a little more prominent. Again, we're just getting into seeding now, so you can't really kill the crop yet, and so we hope for the best. But those are things that we're watching anyway.
Yeah, and U.S. planting progress has, it's been pretty healthy.
Yeah, people get wound up about, corn planting is 2% behind average, and like, come on, they can make that up in an afternoon. It's really not a big deal. But people like me need something to talk about, I suppose, and so we latch onto some unimportant statistic and try to move the markets or claim that the markets move because of that when it may be other things going on too.
So I know you're big on seasonality, and so
yes.
we're at the back end of April here, last day of April. Seasonally speaking, what does this tell us in terms of where we go from here?
Yeah, I mean, each crop kind of has a little bit different seasonal pattern, and so we track each of them differently. So there are some, like Durum, for example, tends to just like start in January and start sliding lower for until it hits the harvest. Those other ones like spring wheat or canola or red lentils, for example, there is a real pattern toward a seasonal, a spring peak in the seasonals. Now, spring wheat hasn't really moved at all. The basis has improved, but spring wheat really hasn't improved much at all in the spring months. Canola has. Red lentils have been pretty flat as well too. But one of the universals across basically all crops is that once you kind of get to, at latest early to mid-June, prices just slide during the summer. And then everybody goes bananas again and thinks, oh, there's something terribly wrong with the market. And why is it doing this? Well, it does that every summer. And so, if there are people who, need to get some pricing done, probably want to look at getting that done sooner rather than later, because that seasonal tendency is almost inevitable. I mean, 21-22 was maybe the exception. Even then there was it started to decline. And then when the drought really kicked in, then it bounced fairly quickly.
Yeah.
But it happens like every year. And so, even in canola that looks really strong, and there's really good reasons for canola to be strong. There's tight supplies, and we're still moving and crushing, still exporting and crushing at a really good clip, and so on. There's really good reasons to think that market should just keep going higher, until whenever. But it's not going to. Like there's no guarantees, but I can almost guarantee that one. At some point, it may be delayed by a week or two or something like that, and it may not be a large dip, but it's going to do it at some point.
Again, you can hear my full conversation with Chuck Penner of Leftfield Commodity Research at RealAgriculture.com. Let's take a break. When we come back, we've got Lemken in the product spotlight right after this quick break.
With volatile markets and rising costs, now's your chance to be part of the solution. Act now to protect your farm's future for generations with Genesis Fertilizers. Gain control and ensure access to locally produced nitrogen. Visit GenesisFertilizers.com to learn more.
If you're serious about agriculture, RealAg's got you covered.
For over 10 years, we've listened to and shared what producers have to say about everything from policy to agronomy from coast to coast.
Keep up with the latest in Canadian agriculture at RealAgriculture.com through daily newsletters, and check out our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us in the RealAg community as we continue to cover and serve North American agriculture.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
The following is a paid-for product spotlight by Lemken. Time for a product spotlight with Lemken. We're talking to Ivor Bernatsky, who is Lemken's North American Marketing Manager. Ivor, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Sean. Great to be here again.
Yeah, so lots of exciting stuff happening at Lemken. There's always innovations. There's also always new stuff happening all the time. And we're going to talk about 4 machines that you have deployed out in the field. And spring is here. And so give us a bit of an update.
Yeah, we're excited to be rolling all across Canada. We have, as you go east to west, we are starting off with our planter, the equalizer planter. Last year we were demoing, and this year over the winter we sold an 8-row planter on 30-inch rows, set up for dry and liquid. It's all decked out with everything you could lay into it with precision planting. That is an exciting opportunity. The farmer knew about precision planting technology, saw how it was laid out, liked it. It's a small footprint, big wheels, low compaction, that everything folds, although whether or not it's the 8-row, 12-row, 24-row, and they all roll up to forward. So those 8, 12, 16, and 24 row, all in 30-inch spacings, they can handle liquid or dry. And in a lot of cases, people are just shocked with the fact that it from factory will deliver and distribute the dry as well. That is a huge cost savings for them. And then once they're in their cab, everything's run off the Precision Planting 2020 monitor. So it makes life simple as well. So that's rolling in Ontario. And then as we come across to Western Canada, we have some machines that are running already. We have our disc drill, the equalizer disc drill, which is on 10-inch row spacing. It's a 40-foot drill. It can be set up with the equalizer toe-between tank. That's getting ready to run some demos. We have sold our first equalizer airtime drill and a toe-between cart. And we're really excited about that. That has just been delivered up to a farm north of Edmonton, and they're getting ready to roll.
Oh, that's exciting. And if we've talked about the equalizer before, this is an exciting time for Lemken.
It is. It's really critical. We're ready to go. Lemken has been in Western Canada or all across Canada for 20 years. We have great dealers. We've got great people. We're set up, although we've really been well known for tillage. We've been making seeding equipment for over 20 years. We just felt that it wasn't quite the right time to do the full-blown push of all the machines until we had that full offering that Equalizer brought us in 2023, when they brought us the disruptive but still conventional disc drill or hole drill, either one. That the hole drill, what we call the airtime drill, is either at 40, 60, or 80 feet with that toe between or toe behind cart that comes with it. That really steps into being competitive anywhere in Western Canada from the size perspective. But farmers are really intrigued by the vertical banding that machine offers, where we're going down to about 5.5 inches is maximum depth, and it creates an inverted cone where that's about 3 inches across the top. Fertilizer, dry or liquid, is mixed in with that soil, spread out nicely. It also opens up that soil for the roots to grow vertically. That fertilizer is sitting exactly where the roots want it to be. We don't have to worry about nutrient stratification. It doesn't have to go over to the side row or to the mid row. It just grows vertically. I'm really excited to bring something new to Western Canada because nobody's interested in just seeing another color paint on the same type of technology. They want to see something that's cost effective and brings in great technology.
Well, and of course, the Lemken brand has great value. People know they can trust it and its quality products. And it's very exciting times getting in the planter and seeder market. If somebody wants to find out more, Ivor, and maybe even get a demo, Because I know that's definitely one of the offers here. What do they do?
They can go to lemkendemo.com, or they can talk to any of our dealers, or if they find themselves available around July the 22nd, we are right now seeding about 300 acres at the Western Crop Innovations site in Lacombe. They have a field day on July the 22nd. So we have 3 different machines running with 4 different crops that they'll be able to see in the ground. We'll have those machines there doing demos at the same time. So whether or not it's a demo in their field, where they're going to lemkendemo.com, or they're showing up at the Western Crop Innovation Field Day, we can show them how the technology works.
Oh, that's great. Even better to be able to see, some of the results of that seed coming out of the ground and then what that emergence looks like, because that's really the key to getting that crop off to a good start and some of those higher yields that everybody is pushing for. Ivor, thanks so much for joining us here today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean.
And again, everybody, that's lemkendemo.com. Couple news items that happened this week. Former federal agriculture minister Charlie Mayer has passed away. He was born and raised in Saskatchewan. Mayer moved to Manitoba to farm in the 1960s, raising Simmental cattle, potatoes, grain, and he also has 3 daughters. He served as president of the Manitoba Beef Growers Association prior to being elected as a progressive conservative MP for Manitoba riding Portage Marquette in 1979. He turned 89 in April. Mayer is often credited with the removal of oats from the Canadian Wheat Board's single desk in 1989. He also played a key role for Canada in the Uruguay round of trade negotiations that resulted in a cap on agricultural subsidies, improved market access for Canadian agricultural exports, and led to the formation of the World Trade Organization in 1995. Mayer, honestly, I saw a lot of commentary out there this week. Mayer was absolutely respected and loved by many people, not just across the prairies, but across Canada, on his contribution to Canadian agriculture. Also, based on the interview we heard with Chuck Pennant from Leftfield Commodity Research, there's a lot of risk out there in 2025, and one noted that farmers and ranchers across Canada will have 3 more months to decide whether to sign up for the Agri-Stability Business Risk Management Program. The federal, provincial, and territorial governments announced last Friday they have agreed to extend the enrollment deadline for the 2025 program year from April 30th to July 31st. So on the eve of the federal election, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and new federal agriculture minister Cody Boyce proposed changes to the margin-based program aimed at offsetting farmers' lost income due to tariffs. The changes, which have not yet been implemented or formally agreed to by the provinces, including raising the compensation rate from 80 to 90% and doubling the payment cap to $6 million per farm for the 2025 year. That is not actually passed yet. Agri-Stability is funded on a 60-40 basis between the feds and the Prov territories. Payments to farmers are triggered when production margin dropped below 70% of an average that is based on the farm's previous 5 years of financial performance. So if you do want to sign up for Agri-Stability, that deadline has been increased for the 2025 year. Okay, we're going to take a break. We've got more coming up here on RealAg on the weekend. Next, we're going to hear from David Coletto of Abacus Data. We're talking the election right after this.
This segment is brought to you by Ag Expert. Deep in the fields and deep in the data to back up your decisions on the farm. Get started at agexpert.ca.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hefner and Lindsay Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada. Of course, we had an election this past week, and, well, I guess trends definitely developed. And to break down what the numbers told us I always love chatting with David Coletto of Abacus Data. I've been interviewing David about political trends and polling for quite some time. And he does a lot of mainstream appearances, but still gives farmers and ranchers across this country and through Real Agriculture a lot of time. And we do appreciate it. Here's a portion of my conversation with David Coletto of Abacus Data. Kelvin Hepner and I had looked at the electoral map. Visually, it sure looks like the rural-urban divide is very alive and well. Is that what the numbers are saying?
It is, and I think one of the things that this election did not change. There were some important changes in demographics, in a bunch of other factors, but that urban-rural divide, I don't know if it became sharper, but it certainly didn't weaken, right? And when I combined our last 3 surveys and get a bigger sample size, and I can go and look at folks who said, look, the first 3 digits of my postal code have a 0 in the middle, they were almost 20 points more likely to vote. The Conservatives won by 20 points, 47 Conservative, 28 Liberal. And then among the rest of the country, the Liberals were ahead by 3. So that gap is still very large, and is persistent and is different, obviously, in different parts of the country. In Western Canada, I think, more rural communities overwhelmingly voted Conservative, as I think they've done over the last number of elections. Atlantic Canada, a little different, in terms of that. But yeah, the big picture is this is still a very sharp divide in our country. And there was no indication, despite how a lot of the rest of the country kind of moved back to the Liberal fold. The folks living in more rural communities don't seem to have done that. What is the same, though, in both rural and urban Canada is the NDP vote collapsed, and it collapsed everywhere, whether it was Saskatchewan or British Columbia or Ontario. So that, I think, is probably the biggest factor explaining why the Liberals pulled off a 4th win.
It seems like though, as we went west, the NDP did recover a little bit, because it was as we were going through the results, Ontario into Manitoba, it was like 4.5%. I think they finished off 6 or something like that.
Over 6.
Yeah.
But let me give you one story. I mean, not a story, but one data point. In Saskatchewan, the home of Tommy Douglas, the birthplace of the CCF and the NDP, they got 7% or so of the vote. That is historically, it's historically low everywhere. But when the NDP last had a bad election like this, which you have to go all the way back to 1993, they still got 23% of the vote in Saskatchewan. So they have lost yes, they've got, pockets of support. They've got 7 MPs elected, but, the NDP has a lot of work to do, I think, now, if they're going to get relevant again at all.
Yeah, now with being 3 seats short of the majority, obviously now we watch to see if some of those leaderless NDP seats cross the floor, which is, I think, what a lot of people are watching closely now. Now, the Bloc, also a disappointment?
Well, certainly, yeah. They didn't get wiped off the map, but they lost, 10 or 11 seats in Quebec. And if you just looked at the country east of Ontario, the Liberals were on their way to majority. They achieved what they needed to do in Quebec by getting, at 42% of the vote, winning a number of Bloc seats. Even yesterday, one flipped over as the vote continued, just outside of Montreal. So the Bloc had not a great night, had a hard time being relevant. They still have, 22 seats, so it's not an insignificant number, but the Liberals made big gains in Quebec, which they had to do if they were going to get to the majority. The rest of the country, though, as you got west of Quebec, spoiled their plans a little bit. In Ontario in particular, and I think the prairies, where many people thought the Liberals might make some gains in Calgary and Saskatoon and Edmonton, that did not materialize. No. And they lost 1 seat in Calgary, the Liberals, and they gained 1. But, they still now only have 2 seats they don't even have 1 in Edmonton anymore. I don't even know. So I think they've got 2 seats in Alberta, as they had before, and only 1 in Saskatchewan now because of that northern seat, that the boundaries changed that made it very Liberal friendly.
Yeah, I think one of those, I think there's an NDP seat in Edmonton.
That's right. Sorry, yeah. So they've got 1 seat in Alberta. So Corey Hogan, who's the lone Liberal elected in Calgary, I suspect will be a cabinet minister when that's
you think BC go more conservative than maybe you thought? I seen a lot of blue there.
Yeah, I mean, BC
Vancouver.
moved in two different directions. I think the interior of British Columbia, as the NDP vote collapsed, a lot of that vote went to the Conservatives. So other than Kelowna, which I think is an artifact of an older population voting Liberal more across the country, outside of Kelowna, it's blue. And then you get towards the lower mainland, and the Liberals did quite well. Liberals won the popular vote in British Columbia, which they almost never do. And they even picked up a few seats on Vancouver Island. So yeah, it's turned even BC into really a two-party province where the NDP vote is down into the teens, which is, again, historically bad for them.
Yeah, that Kelowna race was tight. Like one poll to go, it was like 160 vote difference. And older Canadians, but also probably some influence, people moving from Vancouver. I wonder if that played a role.
Yeah, retirees from Vancouver, I think, are the perfect. Like those were the folks like that that saved the Liberals. It's why they won. There's a seat outside of Toronto, Bay of Quinte, that has Belleville, but the Prince Edward County, the so-called county for those folks who live around Toronto, lots of, transplants from Toronto who went and retired in that beautiful part of the province. Same kind of thing. That seat went Liberal as well.
What did Gen Z and millennials do?
Well, that was an interesting part of the story. I think, this election showed us that those demographics flipped. So if older voters were more inclined to vote Liberal, then we saw a real persistent support for the Conservatives among those younger cohorts, right? Who weren't interested or as focused on Trump. They were much more likely to be telling us in the polls that we did that they were still focused on housing, on the cost of living, on their own economic security. And while Trump was sort of looming still over them, they were less focused on that. And so the Conservatives, I think we're going to see, did better among older voters than they had previously. And that split, particularly among younger men, was wide. Young men and young women really went in two different directions. And that will be one of the stories. Just as an aside, because I'm fascinated by this, there's an organization called Civics that does the student vote every year, right? So while we're voting, as those of age are voting, kids not university, and secondary and elementary school do mock elections. And so there were 900,000 students who voted, and the Conservatives won for the first time the student vote, which I think is reflective of that, one, the influence the Conservatives have had at telling a story to young people about the future, about the insecurity that they're feeling, and their desire to see change. And so if there's one thing to talk about, even though the Conservatives lost, is it looks like their coalition of voters, if it holds, are younger and therefore maybe more durable over the long term. And if I'm going to find silver linings for the Conservatives, it's that maybe their future does look a little bit brighter because they've found a way to connect with young voters in a way that conservative parties have really had a hard time doing in the past.
If you want to hear my full discussion with David Coletto of Abacus Data, you can find it at RealAgriculture.com or download the RealAg Radio podcast. We're back with more of RealAg on the weekend right after this quick break.
Understanding the challenges you face, Nutrient Ag Solutions works with you to find the right solution every time. Nutrient Ag Solutions is one partner, all in. Visit nutrientagsolutions.ca to learn how their offerings work together to support your operation.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
I'm a big proponent of farm management, and really, for a lot of farmers and ranchers across the country, they're really entrepreneurs, right? And so farm management issues are entrepreneur challenges. And so there's a lot of times we can pull some of the solutions from, the broader other industries and bring them into agriculture. And so we've been doing a Mind Your Farm Business podcast for a large number of years. I think we're like on episode 103 or something. And it's brought to you by RBC Royal Bank. And I recorded one of the episodes this week. And we haven't released this episode yet, but I'm going to give you a bit of a sneak peek, because it's a really important question, and I would like your input. Has this been handled well in your family? And you don't have to be a farmer to answer this. If you're in the city and you're in a small business, family business, you feel free to give me your input as well. My email address is shaney@realagriculture.com. The question is, what's the proper way to teach your kids about money or wealth? What's worked for you, what hasn't, whether you're on the giving end or the receiving end. My guest was Ted Oakley, Oxbow Advisors. He's out of Austin, Texas. Now, he handles money for some very wealthy people. He's got some great insights. He's got a new book out, Second Generation Wealth. And we talked about this topic, how to properly teach kids about money and wealth. Here's what he had to say.
No, the other thing, I wrote a book a number of years ago entitled 30 Million and Broke. And I put a chapter in there on athletes because they, so many of them, 75% of them lose everything. And that's another subject all to itself. But they don't learn to appreciate. Appreciating money is one thing. I tell people this, the only way that you're going to teach any kid, any child to appreciate money is they have to experience the scarcity of it. If you don't do that, they're never going to appreciate it. And you're going to say, well, that's hard. I know it's hard, but you know what? That's what makes it work. It makes it work. I could have done a lot for my kids, but from the time they were 14 on, even though they were 13 and 14, I took cash money, paid friends of mine to work them all summer long, give them money on Friday, just like it's somebody else. Then they had a good real job at 16. They had to work in the summers during college. And when they got out, they had to go to work. Okay. Now, other kids were, traveling around Europe, laying out by the swimming pool, doing nothing. And you can't do that and get a result that you probably want.
So probably a lot of people here focus on the behavior. What do you do with the money and how do you handle it? But what I keep on getting from you is that we're focused on the attitude. If we work on the attitude about the money, that's going to provide a better outcome when it comes to the behaviors around it. Is that fair?
Yeah. Well, that's part of it. One of the things I tell people is that, okay, let's say you come into a tremendous amount of money, and obviously you and your spouse are going to change your lifestyle to a degree. You'd probably get a house in the mountains and maybe a house down in the Caribbean or something, but you do something differently. And maybe you expand, you spend some money and your kids can see that. And I've had this question to me before, how do you get around? I said, well, here's what you have to do. First of all, if they ask questions about it, I use a line, and you should use this line. I tell them is that, look, your dad and I, or your mom and I are rich, okay? Because we worked as hard as we could to get to this point, but you're not, all right? And so we're not going to give this to you. If you want to go out and show us what you can do the next 10 years, and we'll talk about other things after that, the next 7 or 8 years, that's one thing. But that's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to show me that you can get, and I know, and by the way, say it lovingly, I know you can. You know what? I have full faith in that you can do it. And I want you to go out and make it on your own and make it go. And then, and you'll be surprised at how much benefit that'll be to you. So once you do that, I tell people, you have to be an example. You can't get on a private plane that you bought and fly to Aspen and fly them with you. That doesn't work. You might say to them, look, you're going to be working all summer, but if that week that you take off, okay, we're going to fly you to Denver on Southwest, okay, and then you're going to catch a ride on a bus or whatever to get up to Aspen. That's how we're going to do this, all right? But Mom and Dad, you got a private plane. I could go with you. Yeah, you could, but you know what? We're already there, and that's our plane. That's not your plane. And you gotta draw the line on it. And I know people say, oh, that doesn't work. I know it works. I've seen people do it. I've got people, honestly, they're worth $1 billion that fly coach. I know it sounds crazy, but they do.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons they do is because they want their children not to feel entitled. And if they go out and make, and so, okay, you're going to go to Spain this summer. Next summer, we'll send you to France or Australia, whatever. No working, just hanging out, or out playing golf at the country club, something like that. Those things won't work. They don't work because they don't learn to be around people. They don't learn to do things for people. They don't learn to have empathy. They don't learn anything, and so I disagree with people that bring their kids along like that. They should draw that line and separate and say, you're not where we are, okay? And you're not going to be right now.
That clip was from the Mind Your Farm Business podcast. We haven't released that episode yet, but you can definitely check out all the episodes that we have published. It's coming soon. It was Ted Oakley, Oxbow Advisors out of Austin, Texas. Some really interesting examples that he gave there. And some people are probably listening to that and saying, ooh, harsh. I don't know if I could do that. Why would you, if you got the means, why would you keep your kids away from it? Do you really want them to go through the same struggles that you did? Well, Ted Oakley kind of thinks, yeah, you need to. You need to create that scarcity, that appreciation for the scarcity of money. There's some things that he said where I'm like, oh, I could be better at that. Or, think about how some of the things that my parents did. But, part of it all comes down to the attitude. But I want your perspective. What has worked or not worked in your experience, right? And there's a lot of farmers and ranchers across the country that have to deal with farm succession and transition. You could be in the city and you've got some of the same challenges on this, right? And not all kids are the same. That was one of the things that Ted talked about in our interview, is have discussions with your kids about money independently, because each kid is different. Maybe needs to hear a little bit of a different message. For the kids that really do, for the one child that's the hardworking and appreciates money and is always, doing that kind of stuff, you can have a different discussion than the one that maybe you're having a hard time getting them to motivated to do anything. So, do you have a sibling like that? You probably do. And maybe you're all perfect. That could also be the case. Did your parents handle it properly? Have you handled it properly? Would you do something different? All you got to do, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Please check out realagriculture.com for all your latest and greatest in ag information. And thank you so much for getting real and getting connected with RealAg on the weekend.